Welcome back to Nutrition 101. This course follows Sizer and Whitney's Nutrition, Concepts and Controversies 16th edition, but I've made adjustments by skipping and rearranging some of the material and adding my own images and information. This video covers Chapter 9, Energy Balance and Healthy Body Weight. The learning objectives for this lesson are to outline the health risks associated with excessive and deficient body fat, explain the concept of energy balance and methods for estimating a person's daily energy requirement, discuss how to assess body weight and body composition, and explore the 4 pillars of behavior change and measures that can be helpful in achieving a healthy body weight. We'll begin with some weight-related statistics in the United States. As you may know, the US is home to people with obesity and underweight status, though these conditions occur at very different rates. Obesity is much more prevalent. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 40.3% of adults were classified as obese in 2021 to 2023. I couldn't find any statistics for underweight for this time frame. However, the CDC found that only 1.6% of adults were classified as underweight from 2017 to 2018. There is no significant difference in the obesity rate between sexes, but females are more likely to be living with severe obesity, which is the highest level of classification. Additionally, obesity is more prevalent in some demographic groups than others, such as race and ethnicity and education level. With race and ethnicity, prevalence is highest in non-Hispanic Black adults and lowest in non-Hispanic Asian adults. For education level, the prevalence is highest in adults without a high school diploma and lowest in college graduates. We can take a closer look by examining some of the graphs published by the CDC in September 2024. For age, obesity is most prevalent between the ages of 40 and 59, and lowest between the ages of 20 and 39 for both sexes. The prevalence of obesity is much greater than severe obesity. Yet, since 2020, their trends have been diverging, with the prevalence of obesity slightly decreasing and severe obesity increasing. As mentioned previously, females are far more likely to be living with severe obesity than males, and this is true across all age groups. There doesn't appear to be much of a difference in prevalence between Americans with a high school diploma or less and Americans who completed some college, but prevalence is significantly lower in those with a bachelor's degree or more. Finally, we see that obesity prevalence varies geographically in the US. In 2023, all 50 states had an obesity prevalence higher than 20%. The highest prevalence is in the Midwest and South regions, and the lowest is in the Northeast. Arkansas, Mississippi, and West Virginia are all states that have an obesity rate that is greater than 40%. Colorado is the only state with an obesity prevalence that is less than 25%. With all of these statistics in mind, let's outline some basic information about obesity. Obesity is a condition characterized by an excessive accumulation of adipose tissue, and it's defined by body mass index, body fat percentage, or waist circumference. These are all ways of estimating how much body fat a person has, and will be covered in detail in the third learning objective. Briefly, the body mass index, or BMI, is an easy but imperfect way to assess a person's body weight relative to their height, rather than just examining body weight in isolation. Obesity is relevant to conversations about nutrition and health because it's associated with an increased risk of numerous health conditions. That includes metabolic diseases like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and type 2 diabetes, breathing problems including asthma and sleep apnea, joint problems such as osteoarthritis and musculoskeletal discomfort, and several types of cancer, including breast cancer and colorectal cancer. Many obesity-related conditions are attributed to adipokine dysregulation, with adipokines being hormones that are produced and released by fat cells. Under normal circumstances, adipokines play a crucial role in various normal physiological processes, but with excessive accumulation of adipose tissue, there's dysregulation, and the changes favor chronic inflammation and insulin resistance. Part of the concern with obesity has to do with body fat distribution. Body fat distribution refers to where adipose tissue is deposited in the body, and it's generally separated into two types called visceral fat and subcutaneous fat. Visceral fat is stored within the abdominal cavity, whereas subcutaneous fat is stored directly under the skin. Body fat distribution is meaningful because visceral fat is more metabolically active than subcutaneous fat, and a high amount is associated with an increased risk of obesity-related conditions. This image highlights some common obesity-related conditions. Obesity is associated with an increased risk of osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, type 2 diabetes, kidney disease, breast cancer, colorectal cancer, gallstones, and fatty liver disease. A few of those conditions develop with the physical presence and weight of the excessive adipose tissue. However, many of them can be related to chronic inflammation. As you can see, adipose tissue plays a role in the immune system by housing and interacting with various immune cells and producing pro-inflammatory adipokines. These functions are useful when adipose tissue levels are kept within the appropriate range, but contribute to chronic inflammation and issues like insulin resistance with obesity. Lastly, differences in body fat distribution can impact obesity-related disease risk. Body fat distribution patterns are often described as apple or pear-shaped. Apple-shaped obesity, which is also called central obesity or android obesity, is characterized by excess fat accumulation around the abdomen and is linked to an increased risk of metabolic diseases like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and type 2 diabetes. Pear-shaped obesity, which is sometimes called gynoid obesity, is characterized by adipose tissue deposited mostly as subcutaneous fat in the hips, buttocks, and thighs, and it's associated with a lower risk of these issues. On the opposite side of obesity, there is underweight. Underweight is a condition in which body weight is below what is considered desirable. It's typically defined by body mass index, which, again, is an easy but imperfect way to assess a person's body weight relative to their height. People who are underweight have a low amount of stored energy. That's a major concern with food insecurity or a wasting disease like HIV or various types of cancer that lead to a progressive loss of body tissue, and it contributes to an increased risk of complications from surgery, including poor wound healing and an increased risk of infection. Underweight also presents challenges for reproductive and bone health. It's associated with difficulty conceiving and an increased risk of miscarriage, and it's associated with an increased risk of osteoporosis and fractures. Putting the concepts from obesity and underweight together, we can see the relationship between body mass index and overall mortality risk, which represents the risk of dying from any cause. Underweight is associated with an increased mortality risk, which initially decreases as BMI increases, but then increases once a certain threshold is reached. Mortality risk then continues to increase as BMI increases into the classification of severe obesity and beyond. Thus, there appears to be much to gain from a survival perspective by keeping BMI within a certain range. Okay, that completes the first learning objective. Outline the health risks associated with excessive and deficient body fat. Next, I'm going to explain the concept of energy balance and methods for estimating a person's daily energy requirement. Energy balance is a concept that describes the relationship between energy intake and energy output. Sometimes it is referred to as calories in, calories out. Energy intake includes calories from foods and beverages. Energy output includes calories burned through metabolism and physical activity. Energy balance is necessary to understand because it offers an explanation for changes to body weight. Weight loss occurs when there's an energy deficit. Weight gain occurs when there's an energy surplus. And weight maintenance occurs when there is equilibrium. Essentially, changes to body weight is a game of calories, and comparing what we consume to what we burn predicts the direction the scale moves, or if it moves at all. In this course, we've seen a balancing act like this twice before, first with protein in Chapter 6 and then with water in Chapter 8. The basic principles of energy balance are quite similar. On one side, we have energy intake, including all calories consumed through foods and beverages. On the other side, we have energy output, which includes all of the calories burned to support normal physiological functions to keep a person alive, plus any additional calories burned through movement and exercise. When calories in are equal to calories out, body weight stays the same. Changes to energy balance produce changes to body weight. Suppose Mr. Davis creates an energy deficit by consuming fewer calories than he burns. In that case, he puts himself in a position to lose weight. But if he creates an energy surplus by consuming more calories than he burns, then he puts himself in a position to gain weight. Significant weight loss or weight gain occurs with consistency in creating an energy deficit or surplus, turning days into weeks and months. Energy intake is pretty straightforward. Foods and beverages contain varying amounts of calories. The number of calories consumed accumulates as we choose different foods throughout the day. Energy output is more complicated than that and requires further explanation. Energy output is also known as the total daily energy expenditure, or TDEE. As mentioned, it's measured in calories, and it's equal to the number of calories a person can consume for weight maintenance. The TDEE has three major components. They are the basal metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food, and physical activity. The basal metabolic rate supports essential bodily functions at rest, like breathing and blood circulation, and it accounts for approximately 70% of calories burned. The thermic effect of food accounts for the digestion, absorption, distribution, and storage of nutrients after eating, and it accounts for around 10% of calories burned. Physical activity accounts for calories burned through movement, and it's the most variable component since there's an enormous range in the amount of activity humans participate in. There are many factors that influence energy output. Examples are age, height, body weight, body composition, and hormones. Here you can see the breakdown of the total daily energy expenditure for Mr. Davis. The basal metabolic rate accounts for 70%, the thermic effect of food accounts for 10%, and physical activity accounts for 20%. Numerous factors like age, height, weight, sex, muscle mass, hormones, diet history, and medical history influence the basal metabolic rate. We won't cover all of these factors in detail, but I'll quickly highlight a few. For height and weight, the taller and heavier a person is, the more calories they burn. For muscle mass, a person with a high amount of muscle mass will burn more calories than someone with lower muscle mass at the same body weight. For hormones, changes to homeostatic hormone levels like thyroxine can increase or decrease the number of calories burned. And for diet history, someone who has engaged in chronic energy restriction often burns fewer calories than a similar weight person who has not. Physical activity is another component of the TDEE that varies considerably. It's typically broken down into calories burned through exercise activity and non-exercise activity. Exercise activity includes structured, purposeful movement like running, weightlifting, yoga, or playing a sport. Non-exercise activity includes movement that isn't necessarily intended to be exercise, like standing, fidgeting, bathing, and preparing food. Accounting for calories burned through exercise even gets complicated when considering factors like exercise efficiency, which refers to how effectively your body uses energy during exercise. Basically, the better trained a person is at a particular movement, the fewer calories they'll burn at a given intensity. Thus, if you take an elite athlete and an amateur and send them out into the water, you'll find that the elite athlete is a highly proficient swimmer and burns fewer calories at the same workload. The amateur will start to burn fewer calories at that workload the more they do the activity. One final aspect I wanted to cover circles back to the effect of age on basal metabolic rate. After all, this is a matter that tends to come up a lot in casual conversations about nutrition and health. Many people perceive that their metabolism has slowed down, and that's why they have gained weight in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or beyond. Thankfully, this has been the subject of some sophisticated research, such as this study led by Herman Ponzer that was published in 2021. The study examined the energy expenditure of people across the lifespan and found that it's highest in childhood and adolescence, holds steady from age 20 to around age 60, and then progressively declines after that. The key takeaway is that our metabolism is consistent for much of our adult life, meaning we can't exactly attribute weight gain in our 20s, 30s, 40s, or even our 50s to a slower metabolism. That weight gain usually has a more obvious explanation, like a decrease in overall physical activity level, a change in diet, or both. At this point, you can see the complexity of the TDEE and may be wondering how to estimate energy output. While there are several ways of doing it, we'll look at 3 methods. A sophisticated method is indirect calorimetry, which is a laboratory test that measures the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. This image shows a woman undergoing the procedure. She's lying in a bed with a hood over her face. The tubing that extends from the hood connects to a machine that will measure the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, which can then be used to predict her energy output at rest. Indirect calorimetry provides the highest level of accuracy, but access is limited since it relies on advanced technology. So, even though it's a sophisticated method, it's not the most common method. The most common method is using a predictive equation, which typically takes age, sex, height, and weight into consideration. One that is popular and quite accurate is the Mifflin-St Jeor equation. Finally, the simplest method is the Estimated Energy Requirements, or EER. The EER are tables with energy amounts stratified by age, body size, and physical activity. They are established by the national academies as part of the dietary reference intakes, which we learned about in Chapter 2. Here we have an example of the Mifflin-St Jeor equation. The equation considers weight in kilograms, height in centimeters, and age in years to predict resting energy expenditure, which is quite similar to the basal metabolic rate. This surfer is 33 years old, weighs 190 pounds, and is 6 feet tall. Once you convert his data into the appropriate units and plug them into the equation, we can see his resting energy expenditure is 1,846 calories. That's the amount of energy his body needs at rest and does not account for calories burned through physical activity. Mifflin-St Jeor can also be applied to females, though the equation differs slightly to account for differences in body composition between sexes. With our lady here, who is 22 years old, weighs 110 pounds, and is 5'1", we can see that her resting energy expenditure is 1,197 calories. That's approximately 650 calories less than the surfer, which makes sense since he is taller and heavier. In order to predict the total daily energy expenditure from the resting energy expenditure, the use of the Mifflin-St Jeor equation is completed by multiplying the initial result by an activity factor. These activity factors vary from publication to publication, so what you see here may not reflect what you read elsewhere or learn in a different class. Still, they usually range anywhere from 1.2 or 1.3 to around 1.9. Let's say our surfer participates in moderate exercise 3 to 5 days per week. We can multiply 1,846 calories by 1.55, which gives us an estimated TDEE of 2,861. Similarly, let's say our lady participates in light exercise 1 to 3 days per week. We can multiply 1,197 calories by 1.375, giving us an estimated TDEE of 1,646. We predict our subjects will need to consume these amounts to maintain their current body weight. A simple alternative to using a predictive equation is to use the EER, which you can now see as a table stratified by age, body size, and physical activity. All a person has to do is find their body size and age group on the left-hand side, and then match it to their physical activity level. Since this method doesn't account for an individual's unique height and weight, it's not nearly as accurate as a predictive equation that does. That brings us to our final section of this learning objective, how to promote weight change. Predictive equations and the EER estimate calories for weight maintenance, and they serve as a useful starting point for determining actual needs but are not always accurate. Unfortunately, there's no official way to adjust for weight loss or weight gain, but a common strategy is to add or subtract 10 to 20% of total calories, or use interactive tools like the body weight planner that are available online. We'll see what the body weight planner looks like in just a moment. No matter which method is used to estimate calorie needs to promote weight change, monitoring body weight is useful for guiding energy recommendations. It is prudent to lose or gain weight slowly and gradually to avoid losing too much muscle or gaining too much fat. Minus 0.5 to 1% of the current body weight per week is desirable for weight loss, and plus 0.25 to 0.5 of the current body weight per week is desirable for weight gain. If no significant weight change is wanted, plus or minus 1.25% of the goal body weight is desirable for weight maintenance. In summary, to promote body weight change, the Mifflin-St Jeor equation can be a useful starting point for determining calorie needs. Then you can add or subtract 10 to 20% of calories, monitor body weight, aim for the appropriate range, and make adjustments based on the results. Here is the body weight planner that I mentioned. It was created by the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases and can be accessed for free online. All you need to do is enter your starting information and goals. It will give you a calorie amount to aim for to lose weight, and the estimated amount you'll need to consume at your goal weight to maintain it. Alright, that completes the second learning objective. Now that I've explained the concept of energy balance and methods for estimating a person's daily energy requirement, let's discuss how to assess body weight and body composition. Understanding these concepts begins with anthropometry. Anthropometry is the study of human body measurements. It's primarily used to assess physical development in children, and it's used to determine nutrition status and disease risk in adults. Height and weight are the most common anthropometric measurements, and they serve as the basis for body mass index, which we have already seen is commonly used to define obesity and underweight status. Height and weight are very simple anthropometric measurements. Other forms rely on more advanced technology. One example that's covered in this section is called dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. Here we have the different anthropometric tools we're going to examine. Height and weight are the most basic measurements. On the bottom right, there's an image of dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, where a person lays flat on a table and their body gets scanned by advanced imaging technology. Above that, there's Skinfold caliper testing, which is used to estimate body fat percentage. The only remaining image depicts waist circumference, which is helpful for capturing the presence of central obesity. The first thing we're going to dive into here is body mass index, or BMI. BMI is an anthropometric tool that assesses a person's weight relative to height. It attempts to account for the limitations of looking at body weight in isolation, and it provides an estimation of total body fat. Think of it this way. You can have two people who weigh 200 pounds, but if one is 6'3" and the other one is 5'2", the way they carry that weight will be completely different. BMI gives us a level playing field to work from that takes a person's height into consideration. BMI is calculated using a simple formula, and I've given it to you in metric and imperial units. If you prefer using metric units, BMI equals weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. If you prefer using imperial units, BMI equals weight in pounds divided by height in inches squared times 703. Once you plug a height and weight in, the result is compared to established BMI standards to see if someone is underweight, normal, overweight, or obese. There are several versions of standards, but the US adopted the standards published by the World Health Organization. To see how BMI works, let's pretend we have a person who is 5'3" and weighs 193 pounds. Using the imperial units provided, we plug the height and weight into the formula and determine the BMI is equal to 34.2. That value is then compared to the established BMI standards, which, according to the standards used in the United States, range from underweight to severe obesity. A BMI of 34.2 puts our person squarely in the lower end of the range for obesity. In some instances, you may see obesity get further broken down into 3 different classes. A BMI of 34.2 is Class 1 obesity, anything from 35 to 39.9 is Class 2, and anything greater than or equal to 40 is Class 3. That brings us to the question, how useful is body mass index? After all, I've already labeled it as something that is imperfect. On the one hand, BMI has some advantages when assessing body weight. It's easy to obtain and non-invasive, it's inexpensive, and it's valuable as a starting point for considering body weight-associated health risks. Nevertheless, BMI does have several limitations as an anthropometric tool. First, it cannot account for body fat distribution, which we know is vital to overall health risks associated with obesity. Second, BMI does not differentiate between fat mass and muscle mass, so muscular people can be classified as overweight or obese even when their fat mass is low. Third, the BMI standards in the US are based on a predominantly white population, meaning applicability to other populations is somewhat limited. That's especially true for East Asian, South Asian, and Southeast Asian populations who consistently have a lower BMI by about 2 to 3 pounds per inches squared in comparison to whites when body fat, age, and sex are equal. And fourth, BMI will never capture influential diet and lifestyle behaviors. BMI can't tell us anything about someone's food selections, alcohol or tobacco use, exercise habits, or sleep patterns, all of which impact disease risk assessment. The next tool we're going to look at is waist circumference. Waist circumference is an anthropometric tool used to assess body fat distribution. It's obtained using a flexible band around the waist just above the pelvis. Technique can vary slightly, but generally, waist circumference is found by first locating the top of the hip bone through palpation, and then taking the measurement just above it. Waist circumference is helpful for identifying a person with central obesity, which we know increases the risk of metabolic conditions. The standard threshold is greater than 35 inches for females and greater than 40 inches for males. Waist circumference has some advantages and disadvantages when compared to BMI. Since it accounts for body fat distribution, it is a better predictor of obesity-related conditions. Nonetheless, it requires a higher level of skill to obtain accurately, so reliability can be lacking depending on who obtains it. Furthermore, waist circumference is more invasive. Wrapping the band around someone's waist can put them in an uncomfortable and potentially humiliating position. The third tool we're going to look at is called Skinfold Testing. Skinfold Testing is an anthropometric tool used to estimate total body fat percentage. It measures the thickness of subcutaneous fat using a skinfold caliper, which is a small device that can grasp the subcutaneous fat at various locations on the body and provides a measurement in millimeters. Skinfold testing requires a measurement from at least 2 locations, such as the biceps, triceps, subscapularis, abdomen, thigh, or calf. The results are inserted into an equation that estimates body density. Then, the estimated body density is inserted into an equation that estimates body fat percentage. Skinfold testing is used far less often than BMI and waist circumference. One reason for this is that it requires the highest level of skill to obtain, and it is invasive. Another reason is the lack of standardization for the procedure and the interpretation of results. Put another way, there's a wider margin for error to occur while obtaining measurements, and even once the results are obtained, there isn't a tremendous amount of consensus on how much body fat is ideal for different populations. Here's an example of skinfold testing using measurements from 3 different sites. First, measurements in millimeters are obtained using the skinfold caliper, in this case, from the abdomen, subscapularis, and triceps. Then, those measurements get plugged into the 3-site skinfold equation for body density, and the results are inserted into a second equation that uses body density to estimate body fat percentage. The estimated body fat percentage can then be compared to standards to determine the desirability of it. Here's where there's an apparent lack of consensus. I adopted these classifications and numbers from the American Council on Exercise after looking through many sources, each with a seemingly different approach. That lack of consensus is part of what makes the real-life application of skinfold testing challenging. The fourth and final anthropometric tool we're going to dive into is dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. This one is commonly abbreviated as DXA or DEXA and pronounced as DEXA. DEXA is a medical imaging test that measures various aspects of body composition. It's primarily used to determine and assess bone mineral density, but it also estimates muscle mass, body fat percentage, and body fat distribution. DEXA is considered a reliable tool for assessing body composition and is superior to BMI, waist circumference, and skinfold testing. It's also easy to obtain and non-invasive since all it requires is the person to lay flat on a table for 10 to 20 minutes. Disadvantages of DEXA include cost and availability. Not many health clinics or doctors' offices have them on site, and it's not typically covered by medical insurance if the goal is to perform a routine body composition assessment. This image shows an example of what the DEXA report may look like once it's completed. It will tell you how much body fat and muscle mass you have and where it's located. It will also give you your BMI, body fat percentage, and bone density, and it will tell you how you compare to other people in your age group, as well as your overall risk of obesity-related metabolic conditions. Okay, that completes the third learning objective. Discuss how to assess body weight and body composition. Let's finish the lesson by exploring the 4 pillars of behavior change and measures that can be helpful in achieving a healthy body weight. The first thing we're going to do in this learning objective is explore the 4 pillars of behavior change. Those 4 pillars are inspiration and motivation, goal setting, support, and self-monitoring. They're critical to achieving a healthy body weight because they help to create the mindset, vision, environment, and feedback necessary for profound change to occur. The first pillar of behavior change is inspiration and motivation. Inspiration and motivation are essential because they help a person understand why a change in body weight is desired. Inspiration is what initiates the decision to make a change. That could include a person seeing a picture from a time when they felt healthier and stronger. Motivation is what drives a person to commit to the journey. That may include the same person wanting to feel healthy and strong again so they can be there for their children. Overall, positive motivation tends to lead to better outcomes than negative. For example, someone who says, "I want to lose weight so I can play with my children at the park," is more likely to be successful than if they were to say something like, "If I don't lose weight, my children will be ashamed of me." Additionally, establishing layers of motivation can be incredibly valuable. Motivating factors can be short-term or long-term. Motivating factors can also be consequential or trivial. It's usually beneficial to have a mix of different types. The second pillar of behavior change is goal setting. Goal setting provides a clear vision and direction for the mission, and it's key to planning, implementing, and evaluating any diet or lifestyle change. When participating in goal setting, it is important to set SMART goals, which is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. For example, I will lose 5% of my body weight in the next 6 months is a SMART goal because it creates a specific amount to aim for that can be measured by tracking body weight. It also outlines a weight loss amount that is both realistic and achievable, and it's time-bound by 6 months. Making a non-specific goal like, I will lose weight, fails to provide a clear vision. And setting unrealistic goals like, I will lose 50 pounds in 2 weeks, sets a person up for failure and disappointment. The third pillar of behavior change, support, creates an environment that is conducive to taking action. Support can influence the emotional and physical environment, meaning it helps to shape a person's attitude toward their goals, as well as their food selections and physical activity level. Family members and friends are often major players in a support system since people tend to spend the most time around them. The example here, which says, my sister joined the gym with me so we can work out together, shows a family member providing emotional and physical support for the journey by becoming an active participant in it. Even though those closest to us are often major players, strangers, acquaintances, and health professionals can be helpful. The example, I joined a Facebook group for moms who want to get fit, shows someone seeking out and finding online support where like-minded people gather and share their stories, successes, and challenges. Local gyms, health clinics, and nutrition programs like Weight Watchers are other examples of places where a person can establish support. Finally, self-monitoring is the pillar of behavior change that provides feedback for monitoring progress toward the stated goals. Self-monitoring should capture more than changes in body weight. For instance, monitoring food intake can be extremely helpful. That includes capturing the energy content, protein content, and serving size of food selections. It can also include the time of day, emotional state, and hunger level when the food is consumed. Monitoring physical activity can be worthwhile too. That includes aspects like the type and duration of exercise, sets and repetitions, and step count. In the end, self-monitoring helps to identify behaviors or triggers that are barriers to success. That way, a person can make adjustments to ensure they progress toward their goals. The act of self-monitoring can also lead to behavior change on its own. When someone actively documents their actions, they're more likely to stay on track and engage in the desired behaviors. These images show traditional forms of self-monitoring. For decades, people would self-monitor with printed sheets filled out by hand. You can see here we have a daily meal planner, a daily food log, a workout tracker, and a weight tracker. While there are still some people who prefer that method, nowadays most people use apps on their smartphones. Phone technology offers a much more efficient way of logging and tracking body weight, food intake, and physical activity. The apps also make the information easy to share with others, and most have built-in intelligence that analyzes the data and guides the user to make changes to help them achieve their goals. Now that we've explored the 4 pillars of behavior change, we'll transition into measures that can be helpful in achieving a healthy body weight, starting with nutrition tips for weight loss. When trying to lose weight, a person should aim for at least 4 eating sessions per day, but have no more than 8 per day. Choose higher volume food options like fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins, and put an emphasis on protein intake, with a total daily intake of up to 2.2 grams per kilogram per day. Then they should also put an emphasis on fiber intake, stick to calorie-free beverages as much as possible, drink before and during meals, and eat slowly, chew thoroughly, and take breaks during meals. None of these are hard and fast rules. Ultimately, a person will lose weight with any number of eating sessions or sticking with low volume, low fiber foods, as long as their total energy intake for the day creates an energy deficit. These tips aim to make that energy deficit easier to achieve by preventing high hunger levels and promoting feelings of fullness throughout the day. The high protein intake is designed to maximize feelings of fullness after meals, since protein is the most satiating macronutrient. It also supports muscle retention when significant weight loss occurs. Next, we have nutrition tips for weight gain. When trying to gain weight, a person should aim for at least 4 eating sessions per day, choose lower volume food options like fatty meats, nuts and seeds, and oils, and eat lower fiber foods, which someone can achieve if they choose refined grains over whole grains. Then they should also put an emphasis on calorie-containing beverages, avoid drinking before or during meals, and chew at a normal pace and avoid taking breaks during meals. Once again, these are not rules a person must follow to gain weight. They're just suggestions that I've found help the greatest number of people establish the energy surplus they need to achieve their goals. Considering both sets of tips, you can see how strategies for weight loss and weight gain basically run counter to each other. For weight loss, it's usually best to choose higher volume food options, eat many high fiber foods, and stick to calorie-free beverages, whereas for weight gain, it's generally helpful to choose lower volume food options, eat fewer high fiber foods, and choose calorie-containing beverages. That contrast extends to various eating behaviors. For weight loss, it's typically helpful to drink before and during meals, eat slowly and chew thoroughly, and take breaks during meals. Whereas for weight gain, it's usually best to avoid drinking before and during meals, chew at a normal pace, and avoid taking breaks during meals. Despite these differences, weight loss and weight gain do share some strategies. One I already mentioned is to aim for at least 4 eating sessions per day, which seems to be optimal for preventing overeating and undereating. The other shared strategies, which haven't been mentioned yet, include minimize alcohol intake, prioritize sleep, and engage in regular physical activity. With that being said, exercise for weight loss usually allows for more cardiovascular activities, since they increase the energy output without contributing much to muscle growth, which is not always helpful when an energy surplus is the goal. The final set of tips is for monitoring body weight. Obtaining body weight measurements is not mandatory for a weight loss or weight gain journey, but it does provide feedback as to whether the interventions are working as intended and if the body weight change is occurring at the desired rate. When monitoring body weight, a person should use the same scale each time, take the measurement first thing in the morning, take the measurement before eating or drinking anything, take the measurement after using the bathroom, and take the measurement naked or in the same light clothing. Then they should also record a measurement 2 to 3 times per week and document weekly averages. Wait for 2 to 3 weeks of data before implementing any changes. And remember that weight fluctuations are normal. All of these aim to ensure the most accurate measurements are obtained. Bouncing from scale to scale, taking measurements at random times throughout the day, and relying on a single weekly measurement will all throw the accuracy off and can lead to a person making unnecessary changes to their plan. Coming to the end, we'll finish with the medical treatment of obesity. Several FDA-approved weight loss drugs are available by prescription. They're designed to reduce hunger, decrease cravings, and enhance satiety, promoting a consistent energy deficit. Semaglutide and tirzepatide are currently the most effective options. Both are weekly injections that mimic the activity of gastrointestinal hormones. In addition to medications, people living with obesity may also consider bariatric surgery, which represents a group of surgical procedures aimed at producing significant weight loss. All of the available procedures reduce the size of the stomach, making it easier to create a consistent energy deficit. Some also influence gastrointestinal hormone secretion and promote malabsorption. The sleeve gastrectomy is the most popular procedure in the United States. which involves removing more than 75% of the stomach to create a narrow tubular structure for food and beverages to pass through. Another popular option is the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. This procedure reduces the stomach to a small pouch and brings a section of the small intestine up to it, so that the remainder of the stomach and part of the small intestine are excluded. Here you can see the popular weight loss medications semaglutide and tirzepatide. Brand names for semaglutide include Wegovy and Ozempic, and brand names for tirzepatide include Mounjaro and Zepbound. They're all weekly injections that promote weight loss by reducing appetite and cravings. Using Wegovy as an example, patients typically get started on an initiation dose that's gradually increased over the course of a few months. Along the way, patients are monitored closely for any negative side effects that may prevent them from moving on to the next dose or continuing with the medication. The most common side effects of this type of weight loss drug are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and constipation. Here's what the sleeve gastrectomy looks like. As you can see, more than 75% of the stomach is removed, leaving behind a much narrower pouch. This is typically a laparoscopic procedure, so the incisions are small and scarring is minimal. The Roux-en-Y gastric bypass is another popular option that surgeons can do laparoscopically. This procedure reduces the stomach to a small pouch and brings a section of the small intestine up to it, so foods and beverages bypass a significant portion of the stomach and the duodenum. For more information about bariatric surgery, I suggest watching my videos on it, which are available right here on YouTube. Alright, that completes the fourth learning objective. We explored the 4 pillars of behavior change and measures that can be helpful in achieving a healthy body weight, bringing us to the end of the lesson. If you want to check out parts of the chapter that weren't covered, here are the sections I recommend.